The phone buzzed on my kitchen counter, its screen flashing a name that made my stomach twist. Rebecca. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind where sunlight spills through the windows of my childhood home, gilding the hardwood floors my father spent years restoring. I was halfway through my coffee, emails open on my laptop, when her call shattered the quiet. Rebecca never called to chat. Her voice always carried a barb, a challenge. At 32, I'd learned to brace myself for her games, but something about the timing felt off, like the air before a storm. I answered, my voice steady, curious to see what she'd planned this time. "Alice," she began, her tone dripping with smug satisfaction. "I've sold the house. Papers are signed, and the new owners move in next week. I hope you've learned your lesson about respecting your elders." The words hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch. The house she spoke of was my father's legacy, the one he left me when he passed 2 years ago. Every hand-carved banister, every stained glass window held memories of him. Memories Rebecca seemed eager to erase. I took a slow sip of coffee, letting her words hang in the air. "The house," I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. "You mean Dad's house?" "Don't play dumb, Alice," she snapped. "The one you've been squatting in rent-free since your father died. That ends now. I found buyers who will appreciate the property." Her words were sharp, meant to wound, but they only sparked a flicker of amusement in me. She had no idea about the meeting I'd had with Dad's lawyer, Mr. Harrison, days after the funeral. She didn't know about the documents we'd signed, the truth about who owned this house. "That's interesting," I said carefully. "And you're sure everything's legal?" She scoffed, her confidence unshaken. "Of course it's legal. I'm his widow, and the house was in his name. You may have been his precious daughter, but I have rights." Her voice turned venomous. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before questioning my remodeling plans." There it was, the real reason. 3 months ago, I'd stopped her from gutting the house's historic charm, the features Dad had lovingly preserved. This sale was her revenge. "I hope you got a good price," I said, my tone light, almost teasing. "Don't worry about the price," she retorted. "Just be out by next Friday. The buyers are eager to start renovations." I could picture her smirking, imagining me scrambling to pack, if only she knew. "Thanks for letting me know," I said, my voice calm. "Goodbye, Rebecca." As I hung up, a smile tugged at my lips. She thought she'd won, but she'd underestimated me, just as she'd underestimated Dad's foresight. I set my coffee down and dialed Mr. Harrison. This was about to get interesting, and I had a front-row seat to watch her carefully laid plans unravel. The house felt alive with memories as I hung up with Rebecca, her smug voice still echoing in my mind. At 32, I'd lived in this American home, sprawling across 3,000 square feet of history, my entire life, except for college. Its walls, painted in the soft blues Dad chose, held stories of our laughter, our late-night talks. The garden, where his roses bloomed in defiant bursts of red, was his sanctuary. He'd passed 2 years ago, leaving me not just the house, but a legacy I was determined to protect. Rebecca's call had stirred something fierce in me, a resolve to honor him by keeping this place untouched by her greed. 5 years ago, when I was 27, Rebecca entered our lives. Dad married her in a quiet ceremony, and at first, she played the part of the caring stepmother perfectly. Her smiles were warm, her words sweet, promising to blend into our family. But after the wedding, her mask slipped. She'd make snide comments about my close bond with Dad, suggesting I was too old to be so attached. She'd rearrange Dad's study, move his old records to storage, and push to redecorate rooms he'd spent decades restoring. The hand-carved banisters, polished to a gleam, were outdated to her. The stained glass windows, casting rainbows across the living room, were gaudy. Dad saw through her eventually, but by then his health was fading, his strength sapped by an illness that seemed to come from nowhere. 3 months ago, her true colors flared. She announced plans to remodel the house, to rip out the hardwood floors and replace the roses with a modern patio. I fought back, citing the house's historic value, its place in our family's heart. She backed down, but her eyes burned with resentment. Now, Her attempt to sell the house was retaliation, a power play to erase Dad's memory and assert her control. But she didn't know what I knew, what Dad had ensured I'd understand when the time came. I thought back to a night in his final months, when Rebecca was at her weekly spa appointment. He called me into his study, his voice weak but urgent. "Alice," he'd said, using the nickname he'd given me as a child. "Trust me. Things aren't what they seem with Rebecca. I've made arrangements. When the time comes, see James Harrison. He'll explain everything." I'd wanted to press him, to ask what he meant, but his eyes were heavy with exhaustion. 2 weeks later, he was gone, leaving a void that Rebecca wasted no time trying to fill. Days after the funeral, I met Mr. Harrison at his office downtown, a small space cluttered with legal books and framed photos of his grandkids. He was warm, his voice steady as he laid out Dad's plan. The house, he explained, was never solely in Dad's name. Through a series of legal maneuvers, trusts, and transfers I didn't fully grasp, Dad had protected it, ensuring I was the sole beneficiary. Rebecca's claim as his widow was meaningless. She had no legal right to sell. "Your father saw this coming," Mr. Harrison said, a glint of admiration in his eyes. "He wanted you safe, and this house preserved." I walked through the house now, my fingers tracing the door frames Dad had sanded smooth, the window seats where we'd read together, the garden path lined with roses he'd tended. Each step grounded me, reminding me why I'd fight for this place. Rebecca thought she could erase Dad's legacy with a signature, but she'd miscalculated. She didn't understand the depth of his foresight, the strength he'd instilled in me. I picked up a photo from the study, one of us painting the living room, both covered in specks of blue but grinning. It was a reminder. This house wasn't just walls and windows. It was us, our laughter, our love, our unshakable bond. Rebecca's scheme was bold, but Dad's plan was smarter. And I was ready to see it through, to let her overconfidence lead her straight into the trap he'd set years ago. Rebecca's call had left a bitter aftertaste, but as I stood in the study, surrounded by Dad's books and the scent of old wood, I felt a quiet certainty. Her smug declaration about selling the house was a misstep, a move that would unravel her plans faster than she could imagine. At 32, I'd learned patience from Dad, how to wait, watch, and let others reveal their flaws. Now, with the house's future at stake, I was ready to act, not with anger, but with the precision he'd taught me. I picked up my phone and dialed Mr. Harrison, the lawyer who held the key to Dad's carefully laid trap. "Alice," he answered, his voice warm with anticipation. "I was expecting you." I smiled, picturing his cluttered office, the legal books stacked high. "She did it," I said, my tone steady. "Rebecca's trying to sell the house." His chuckle was soft, almost conspiratorial. "Did she now? Well, this should be interesting. Shall we set things in motion?" I nodded, though he couldn't see. "Yes, but make sure the buyers know the truth. I don't want them caught in her mess." Mr. Harrison agreed, promising to contact their lawyer immediately. As we hung up, I felt the first stirrings of victory, like a breeze before dawn. I walked through the house, my fingers brushing the cool glass of the stained windows, their colors dancing across the floor. The living room, with its 12-foot ceilings, felt like a sanctuary, each corner whispering memories of Dad, his laughter as we hung curtains, his pride when he finished the fireplace. Rebecca's threat to let buyers renovate this place stung, but it also fueled me. She didn't know the house was mine, secured in a trust she couldn't touch. That knowledge was my shield, and I wielded it with care, waiting for the right moment to strike. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Keys on my desk by Thursday, Alice. Don't make this difficult." Her words were sharp, demanding, but I saw them for what they were, desperation masked as control. I typed back, "Don't worry, Rebecca. Everything will work out." The vagueness was deliberate, a hint that I held cards she couldn't see. I set the phone down and opened a drawer in Dad's desk, pulling out a photo of us in the garden, kneeling among the roses. His smile, broad and unguarded, reminded me why I was fighting, not just for the house, but for him, for us. Later, Mr. Harrison called again. "The buyer's lawyer has been notified," he said, his voice tinged with amusement. They're drafting a letter to Rebecca as we speak. She'll know by this afternoon. I leaned against the kitchen counter, the same one where Dad and I used to make pancakes. How long until she reacts? I asked. Not long, he replied. She's in for a shock. I thanked him, my mind already picturing her face when the truth hit. The house, with its 3,000 square feet of history, wasn't hers to sell. It was mine, and I'd protect it, not with shouts, but with the quiet strength Dad had always admired. The afternoon sun was low, casting long shadows across the garden when Rebecca's Mercedes screeched into the driveway. I was kneeling among Dad's roses, their petals soft under my fingers, when the car door slammed. Her heels clicked furiously on the stone path, and I looked up to see her storming toward me, a crumpled letter in her hand. At 32, I'd faced her barbs before, but this was different. Her carefully polished facade was cracking, rage spilling through. I stayed seated, my calm a deliberate contrast to her fury, ready for the confrontation I'd known was coming since her call. "You conniving little witch!" she screamed, thrusting the letter at me. "You knew about this all along." The paper, marked with a lawyer's letterhead, trembled in her grip. I rose slowly, brushing dirt from my jeans, and met her gaze. "Knew about what, Rebecca?" I asked, my voice gentle but firm. Her eyes blazed. "The trust, the property transfer. You and that lawyer plotted this behind my back." I tilted my head, letting her words hang. "No," I corrected. "Dad and Mr. Harrison arranged it. I just followed his wishes." Her face contorted, disbelief warring with anger. "Your father would never do this to me. This is a mistake." I stepped closer, the rose's scent grounding me. "He did exactly this, to protect me and the house. He saw through you, Rebecca. He knew what you'd try after he was gone." She flinched, her designer heels sinking into the soft soil. "That's impossible," she spat. "He trusted me. He loved me." I raised an eyebrow, my voice quiet but piercing. "Did he? Or did he let you think he did?" The color drained from her face as the truth sank in. I pressed on, each word measured. "The house was never in his name. He transferred it to a trust years ago before he met you. I'm the sole beneficiary. You had no right to sell it." Her hands shook, crumpling the letter further. "You're lying," she whispered, but doubt flickered in her eyes. "Check the property records," I suggested, my tone almost kind. "They're public. Dad made sure everything was transparent when the time came." Rebecca's breath hitched, her composure unraveling. "The buyers are threatening legal action," she said, her voice breaking. "Do you know how humiliating this is?" I nodded, unfazed. "Almost as humiliating as trying to throw me out of my own house, or pretending to care about Dad just to get his money." She recoiled, as if I'd struck her. "You don't understand my relationship with him," she snapped. I stepped closer, my voice low. "I understand more than you think. Dad told me everything, about the prenup you wouldn't sign, the withdrawals from his accounts, the men you met while he was in the hospital." Her eyes widened, shock replacing anger. "He knew?" she whispered. I nodded. "He knew everything. He waited, watched, and planned. Like father, like daughter." For the first time, Rebecca was speechless, her shoulders slumping. I pulled out my phone, holding it up. "I've recorded this conversation. Want me to add it to the file, Mr. Harrison's building, about your fraud?" Her gaze darted to the phone, panic flashing. "You wouldn't," she hissed. I smiled, channeling Dad's quiet strength. "Try me." She took a step back, her heels catching in the grass. "This isn't over," she threatened, but her voice lacked conviction. "It is," I said, my tone final. "Leave the house. Leave me alone. Leave Dad's memory alone. Try anything else and everything comes out. The affairs, the money, all of it." Her eyes searched mine, calculating, but she found no bluff. "Fine," she spat, turning toward her car. "Keep your little victory." As she stormed off, the lawyer's letter slipped from her hand, fluttering to the ground. I picked it up, smoothing the creased paper. The legal jargon was dense, but its message was clear. Rebecca's sale was fraudulent, her claim non-existent. She'd lost, and she knew it. The roses swayed in the breeze, their beauty a silent testament to Dad's enduring presence. I slipped the letter into my pocket, my heart steady. Rebecca thought she'd teach me a lesson, but she'd learned one instead, about underestimating the strength hidden in patience. Rebecca's taillights had barely faded down the driveway when a stillness settled over the house, as if it sighed in relief. The garden, with its 20-foot rows of Dad's roses, glowed under the dusk, their petals catching the last light. At 32, I'd faced her wrath and won, but the victory felt hollow without understanding the full scope of Dad's plan. I returned to the house, the oak floors creaking softly underfoot, and headed to his study. The room, with its shelves of worn novels and the fireplace he'd rebuilt, felt like a shrine to his memory. I needed answers, a final piece to make sense of his silent strategy. I began sorting through his desk, the drawers heavy with papers and mementos. My fingers brushed an envelope tucked beneath a stack of old letters, my name, Alice, written in Dad's familiar scrawl. The date, just days before his death, sent a shiver down me. I opened it, my breath catching as his words unfolded. My dearest Alice, if you're reading this, Rebecca's made her move, and you've learned of the trust. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything. She watched too closely, and I needed her to believe she'd won. His confession was raw, each sentence a revelation. He'd suspected her for years, noticing her subtle cruelties, her greed masked as love. The letter grew darker. A year into our marriage, I fell ill. Dizzy spells, weakness. It wasn't natural. James investigated, and we found traces of something in my tea, slow but deliberate. I played along, let her think I was fading, while I secured the house for you. My hands trembled, rage and grief colliding. Rebecca hadn't just schemed for the house. She'd tried to steal Dad's life. He'd outsmarted her, transferring the house to a trust, but the cost was his silence, his pretense of trust in her. Forgive me for seeming distant those last months, he wrote. It was to protect you. He ended with a cryptic note. Check the fireplace behind the loose brick. There's something for you. I crossed to the fireplace, its stone warm from the day's heat. The loose brick, third from the left, came free easily, revealing a small USB drive and a scrap of paper. Show this to the police when you're ready. My pulse raced as I plugged the drive into my laptop. Videos loaded, grainy footage from hidden cameras Dad had installed. Rebecca in the kitchen was slipping powder into his tea. Rebecca, on the phone, plotting with a man I didn't recognize, discussing the house's value after he's gone. Each clip was a dagger, proof of her betrayal. I called Mr. Harrison, my voice shaking. James, I found Dad's letter, and a USB drive, with videos. He was quiet, then said, Are you ready to take the next step? I stared at the screen, Rebecca's face frozen in guilt. Exposing her would mean justice, but also chaos. Trials, publicity, Dad's pain laid bare. Not yet, I decided. Let's keep it as insurance. James chuckled softly. Your father said you'd choose restraint. You've got his mind for strategy. I hung up, the USB drive heavy in my hand. For now, it was enough to know I held her fate, a silent power Dad had gifted me. The days after Rebecca's defeat brought a quiet transformation to the house. Its 3,000 square feet felt lighter, as if Dad's spirit had reclaimed every room. I spent evenings restoring what she'd touched, repainting walls in his soft blues, rehanging curtains we'd chosen together. The garden, with its roses stretching across 20 feet of earth, bloomed brighter, their scent a reminder of his care. At 32, I was no longer just his daughter, but the guardian of his legacy, shaped by his lessons in patience and strength. Rebecca's shadow was gone, and I was ready to close this chapter. A week later, a thick envelope arrived from Rebecca's lawyer. Inside was a formal document, its pages crisp with legal weight, relinquishing any claim to the house or Dad's estate. A handwritten note was tucked beside it, her script sharp. You win, Alice. I'm leaving the state. Keep what you know to yourself. I read it in the study, the fireplace's glow warming the room. She'd found the cameras, I realized, likely searching the house in panic after our confrontation. The USB drive's existence, even unshown, had forced her surrender. I set the note aside, feeling not triumph, but peace. Dad's plan had worked, not through confrontation, but through the threat of truth. I tended the garden daily, kneeling among the roses as Dad once did. Their roots, hidden deep in the soil, mirrored the strength he'd taught me. Quiet, enduring, blooming when the time was right. One evening, as I pruned a thorny stem, I felt him near, his voice almost audible. "The strongest roots grow in silence, Alice, hidden until they're needed." I smiled, the shears steady in my hand. He'd known this day would come, had prepared me for it with every cryptic word, every careful choice. The USB drive remained behind the fireplace brick, a silent guardian. I didn't need to use it. Rebecca's departure was proof enough of its power. The house stood as it always had, its stained glass windows casting rainbows, its banisters gleaming under my touch. It was more than a home. It was a testament to Dad's love, his foresight, his unshakable belief in me. I walked through its rooms, the floors creaking softly, and felt a completeness I hadn't known since his death. Rebecca had tried to steal this place, to sever our bond, but she'd failed. In the garden, under a sky streaked with dusk, I looked at the roses, their petals unfurling in perfect defiance. They were Dad's heart, and now mine, tended with the same care he'd shown. His final lesson echoed. Timing was everything. I'd waited, watched, and let Rebecca reveal her nature, just as he'd done. The house, with its history etched in every beam, was safe. Somewhere, I knew Dad was smiling, his quiet strength alive in me. As I clipped a rose and set it on the kitchen table, I whispered, "We did it, Dad." The words hung in the air, a promise kept, a legacy preserved. As I stood in the garden, the rose's fragrance wrapping around me like a familiar embrace, I realized the deepest lesson Dad had left me through this ordeal with Rebecca. At 32, I'd thought strength meant fighting back, matching fire with fire, but he'd shown me something wiser. Patience, he'd taught, was a weapon sharper than anger, a way to let truth unfold without losing yourself. Rebecca's schemes, her attempt to sell my home, her betrayal of Dad, had crumbled not because I shouted or struck, but because I waited, trusted his plan, and let her overconfidence unravel her. Each moment I held back, each cryptic reply I gave was a choice to honor his belief in timing. The house, with its 3,000 square feet of memories, stood because of that restraint, its walls a testament to the power of silent roots growing strong beneath the surface. Dad's letter, the USB drive, the trust, they were tools. But the real gift was his philosophy. Strength lies in knowing when to act and when to watch. I clipped a rose, its thorns pricking my thumb, and smiled. Life, like this garden, demanded care and patience, a willingness to let things bloom in their season. Rebecca had taught me about deception, but Dad taught me about trust, in myself, in him, in the quiet justice that comes from waiting. As I placed the rose on his old desk, I knew I'd carry this lesson always. True victory isn't in outshouting your enemies, but in outlasting them, letting their own choices reveal their defeat while you stand, steady, in the light of what you've preserved.